What is up, everybody? Josh Tapp here again, and welcome back to the Lucky Titan. And today we're here with James D. Feldman, and I have to pronounce the D so you can get ranked on Google, guys. You got to make sure you remember the D. But James, this guy has such an awesome story, and honestly, 500 amazing stories that we could talk about for days. This guy has worked for 40 years working with Fortune 500 companies, helping them get unstuck. And for most of you listening to this show, you know that's the entire purpose of our show is to help you to break those ones and threes, right? The 100,000, 300,000, 1 million, $3 million barriers. They're the barriers that a lot of us get stuck at because it's either a mindset issue or we don't have the correct strategies and tactics in place to scale. And James is the guy to talk to us about really breaking those barriers. So James, say what's up to everybody and then we'll hop right in.
Hey, Josh, thanks for having me. Look forward to it.
It's going to be a blast. So I'm going to ask you the question. I had to take note of it because I thought it was hilarious. And this is how we're going to kick it off, everybody. So James, why did you buy a railroad car full of pasta sauce?
Funny you should ask that, Josh. So while I was in law school, we had study groups. And in the study group, a guy called me and goes, "Hey, Feldman, can't make the study group. I've got to adjust a railroad car." What's that mean? You know, adjust a railroad car. I said, I'm just not following you. How do you adjust a railroad car? He goes, "We lost it." How do you lose a railroad car? He goes, "Well, it's a long story, but I got to go out." I said, "I'm going with you." So I get in the car. It's like 100 degrees. We go to the Atchison, Topeka, and Santa Fe switching yard, and we find this railroad car. It's locked. We got to go back. We got to get a bolt cutter. We go in, we cut it open. It's filled with number 10 cans, restaurant size cans of Chef Boyardee pasta sauce. Now, how much is in it? I don't know. He doesn't know. There's no manifest. So I said, okay, let's measure the size of a can. We're going to measure the length, width, and height of this rail car. So it's 60 feet long, 20 feet high, 4 feet, 8.5 inches wide. Turns out that's about 33,000 gallons of pasta sauce, give or take.
Take a few thousand gallons.
Yeah. So I'm standing there and I'm looking at it. I'm looking at him and I go, "Now what?" He says, "Well, I got to find somebody to buy it." I said, "Well, what would you take for it right now?" 5 grand. Sold. Now, my quick brain said if there's really 33,000 gallons, give or take, and I only get $1 a gallon, I'm making money. I'm 5 times, 6 times my investment. Well, the key to this is I didn't have $5,000. I had to go to the bank. So I go to the bank. I ask him for the money. The bank basically says, "Get out of here. We're not going to give you the money." Why not? Well, nobody buys a box car filled with pasta sauce. Well, I just did. "Jim, if you really want it, bring your camera equipment. We'll lock it up in our safe and we'll give you the money." So I buy it. I get the money. I am high fiving myself. It's Thursday. I am just a genius. I'm going to make all this money. Friday morning, phone rings. "Hello, Mr. Feldman. Tim Schmidt, Atchison, Topeka, and Santa Fe Railroad. Hi, hi. Did you buy railroad car MDW 1967? "Why, yes, I did." He says, "Move it." I'm sorry, what? He says, "Move it." Josh, it never occurred to me I had to move the railroad car.
Oh, geez.
I'm too busy high fiving myself for buying it. So he says, "Well, you do have a locomotive." "No." "You do have a caboose." "No." "You do have an engineer." "No." "You do have a trainman." "No." He says, "This is like the stupidest thing I've ever heard of." I said, "Get in line. The bank already said that." He says, "Look," he says, "today's Friday. I'm off for the weekend. I'm taking a couple of personal days. Have an answer by Wednesday." Okay. Saturday, I got the study group with the kids in law school. I figured they're smart people. They're from law school. So I get a half a thing of beer. I get some pizzas. And I said, "Listen, before we start studying, I got a game to play. What if?" What if you had all this pasta sauce? And we started figuring out where it was going. And we come up with prisons, military, universities, hospitals, food service people. Okay. So keep in mind, there's no cell phones. I go to the library on Sunday. I start figuring out who's within a 100-mile distance. Monday morning, I'm on the phone. I get a hold of the military base nearby, and he goes, "What's the expiration code?" What? What's the expiration code? Josh, back in the car, back to the railroad yard, trying to find this damn railroad car, which they had moved.
Oh no.
Now I am, if you've never been to a switching yard, it must be 1,000 acres of just railroad cars. And of course, every railroad car looks the same. So I finally find it. I finally find it. I rip open a box. I get the code. I go back. I call him. And he goes, okay, it's good for about a year and a half. Terrific. He says, tell you what. He says, $2 a gallon. Yes. $66,000. Pay the bank back five. I'm going to clear $61,000 for a couple of days' work. I am a genius. He says, all I need is your GSA number. My what? Your GSA number. Government supply, government service. I don't have one. Well, you got to have one. Can't sell to the government without one. So I'll mail you the papers. You fill them out. You mail them to Washington. I said, I don't think you understand. I need to get this done quickly. He says, son, I cannot do anything without a GSA number. Goodbye. Thank you. Call the prison. Great. GSA number. Call the university. GSA number. Call the hospital. GSA number. Okay, it's pretty clear. I need a GSA number. I go back and I figure out, instead of where it's going to, where was it coming from? Well, in that case, Chef Boyardee was owned by American Home Family Products. I get on the phone, I get through the company switchboard operator, and I get to the desk of the product manager. He's in a meeting. I'm talking to the girl on the phone, and she says, listen, I can't help you. I'm a temp. I said, well, I'm really in a jam. She goes, why? And I said, well, I'm a college student, which was true. I'm doing some research, which was true. And I'm doing research on the cost of, say, a commodity like pasta sauce and how much it costs to make, getting through the distribution channels, packaging, transportation to the end consumer. She says, can't help you. I told you I'm a temp. But let me look on the desk. On the desk, she says, it's the end of the quarter. There's a report here. Let me see if there's anything in there that'll help you. I can hear her sorting through it. She goes, it says here manufactured end cost $3 a gallon. Does that help? Yes, it does. Put me on hold. Why? Because I want to be the first guy that the product manager talks to. I sit on hold for 45 minutes. It is now Tuesday afternoon, 4:30 on the East Coast, and the clock is ticking. Guy picks up the phone and goes, I don't know who you are. I don't know what you want, but I got to hand it to you. I've never had anybody sit on the phone for this long. What do you want? I said, I want to sell you back your pasta sauce. He goes, why would I do that? Because we're going to make a deal. He says, what's your product code number? Ah, I knew. He says, how much do you have? I knew, 33,000 gallons. He goes, listen, I don't want to mess with this. He says, I give you $1.50 a gallon. Josh, I turned him down. Why? Because in my head, I had what? I had $2 a gallon from the military. Only in my head. I really hadn't made the sale, but in my head, I had $66,000. He says, $1.50. Do we have a deal? I said, no. He says, what's your counter? I said, $1.65. I figured for 10%, he's not going to lose the deal, right? He says, at $1.65, do we have a deal? I go, no. Any idea why, Josh? Give your listener a second. Any idea why?
Not a clue.
How much are you giving me for the box car itself? Not just the contents, but the railroad car. Remember, I bought the box car with the pasta sauce. It's got to be worth something. If you price out a railroad car today like that, it's about 150 grand. I figured back then it was worth 75. I said, I'll take 35. He says, we got a deal. I'll wire transfer the money. Give me the information. So I go to the bank. I wait for the wire transfer. They take their 5. They didn't charge me anything because they hadn't even done the paperwork yet. I then got 2 cashier's check. I got one for 5 to give to the guy who took me, the insurance adjuster guy. And I said, next time you adjust a railroad car, I'm the first guy you call. I went to the guy from the Atchison, Topeka, Santa Fe, and I said, somebody else may have lost a railroad car. I'm the first guy you call. Here's $5,000. So I invested 10 and ended up still netting more than if I had sold it to the military in the first place. And the end of that story is that's how I started thinking inside the box, because railroad cars are also called box cars. And I realized that we are a culture that's been told, think outside the box. If I was outside that boxcar, I would have never known what was inside. I would have never known the product code. And that's our problem. Ladies and gentlemen, go inside the box using 3D thinking. Depth, how much do you know about the problem? Distance, how far can you take the solution and who's willing to pay for it? And determination, do you have the bandwidth, the wherewithal, the financial stamina to take this out and make it work? That's 3D thinking. And that's why I always think inside the box.
See, and that's beautiful. And moral of the story is he got a GSA code at some point. Yeah.
That's right, I did.
Oh boy. Well, how cool is that? I mean, I love that story. I didn't even know the answer to that question. So that was brilliant. It's really funny about this is that the resourcefulness, right? And the tenacity. And in 3 or 4 days, you made $65,000 or something.
Correct.
And that was 20 years ago, you said?
1967.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's a lot of money.
A lot of money then.
That's a lot of money back then. And I hope people look at that and say, okay, am I thinking too far outside the box? So I need to get in the box, like you're saying. And I love that concept because I know you're, I guess, personifying it, I guess, with the box car, but you're talking about really figure out there might be some dumb little thing like somebody lost a box car. Who would ever think to make that a business? I mean, that's just so bizarre.
Well, here's the story, Josh. If I come to you and I have a box, I say, Josh, do you want the box or $5? You go, I'll take a risk. Josh, you want the box or you want $100? Ooh. Josh, do you want the box or $500? What has changed about what you know about the box? Nothing. What has changed is what is your risk tolerance? And entrepreneurs are typically risk takers as opposed to risk averters. There are whole companies that have built their entire business on the box. Tiffany. I don't care what you put in that little blue box. People think it's jewelry. Godiva, the gold box. I don't care what's inside. It must be better chocolate. And so if you're giving someone, let's say, a housewarming gift, would you ever give them a bar of Hershey's? No, you'd give them a box of Godiva, even though that box may not be as good as other products. The box has become its own branding. And so you've got to remember that packaging is often what is the competitive differentiation in buying one product over another.
I love that because it's such a simple tweak too. I mean, the cost might go up a couple pennies on your packaging, but it might make leaps and bounds of difference in what you can charge for that product.
Well, look at an Apple product. The box that Apple puts their product in, most people keep it because it's such a beautiful box. What are you going to do with an empty box like that? Nothing. Zero.
I have friends who have literally made that a part of their house is
exactly
their line of iPhones they've bought every single year.
That's right. I mean, I've got them all stacked up behind me. I don't know what I'm going to do with them. I don't care. But the box is beautiful.
All right. Well, and so I want people to be thinking about that as they're listening to this, because what it comes down to, like you're talking about is the packaging. What's one of the big differentiating factors that you can change that separates you from everybody else? And I want to ask you this in particular, because, James, the working with a Fortune 500 company, working with a small business, I think a lot of times we say, oh, it's just, they're two different worlds, but there's some just simple concepts that work all across, like between those spectrums. And for you, what do you feel like have been kind of the biggest differentiating factors that you've seen working with these companies?
The bigger the company, the harder it is to get an individual to think like an entrepreneur. And the reason is that corporations typically punish failure, but don't reward success. I was doing some coaching for a little company called Exxon. And this was right after the Gulf issue where all of that oil spilled into the Gulf. And it was a closed door meeting and a lot of NDAs and so forth. And I said to the group, before we get started, I have one question, only one, and I really want an answer. How many of you thought that what happened was a possibility? And nobody wanted to answer. And I said, listen, it changes the entire trajectory of our meeting if I can't get the answer. And one guy said, well, we all knew it was a possibility, but it would have been $500 million to fix it. I said, as opposed to $60 billion waiting for it. He goes, yeah, but it wouldn't have happened on my watch. And that's the logic of big companies. Entrepreneurs have a tendency to look at it a little differently and say, this is my watch. This is my money. And if I don't pivot, if I don't identify what can be done now to discover new opportunities, I may lose out to my competitor. So as we get through the pandemic, I think there's a couple of things that everybody should recognize. Number one, everybody makes a good product and service today. This is a bunch of junk has kind of gone by the wayside. The currency that's coming up is going to be called the customer experience. And the better the customer experience, the more likely you're going to get business. Number two, is that customer experience a one-off or is it part of the culture? So my rule is whoever gets the call owns the call. And that person needs to be empowered to make the decision. So as a small business, the entrepreneur is the guy making the decision. But as he or she grows the business, they have to delegate. And if they don't delegate with that entrepreneurial responsibility of do what it takes to keep the customer. Stu Leonard has a grocery store and he's got this big granite stone. And the stone says, rule number one, the customer is always right. Rule number two, if you think he's wrong, read rule number one.
That's brilliant. I love it.
Look, the customer is not always right. Get that out of your head. But the customer votes with his dollars or her dollars. And at the end of the day, the customer is not going to take the responsibility for when it goes south. So here's the customer service be all end all. You listen. You then repeat the problem back to the customer to make sure you've understood it. Because often the person listening and the person talking aren't communicating. So you go, let me see if I understand exactly what's happened. You bought it. It didn't work. I just want to ask you one question. What's that? Did you plug it in? And the answer to that is, of course I did. Well, did you plug it into a electrical outlet that might have also been controlled by the wall switch on and off? Uh-oh. Now you can't say, hey, dummy, did you plug it in?
Right.
But you let them walk through the process. And then here it is. Josh, I understand what the problem is now. It doesn't work. We've checked the electrical. We've done everything. Josh, what is it that you would like for me to do to make you happy? I don't know. Most customers have gotten so fired up and so angry, they haven't worked out the solution in their own head. Did you want your money back? Did you want us to replace it? Etc. And that's really where the entrepreneur comes in. You have to create a vision where others are not looking, what others are not seeing, and apply uncommon common sense. Because common sense is not so common these days.
Complex sense is common these days.
Yes.
I love that. So I'm just going to repeat that back too as well so we can get it right. So you listen to the customer, repeat the problem back to them and ask them, what would you like me to do to make you happy?
Yes.
Like, I mean, it sounds so stupidly simple, but I'm like, I have never done that. I've never done that to a customer.
because we're trying to second guess the customer, or he's trying to take advantage of me, or whatever.
Right.
Remember, the coolest thing about customer service is it's one off.
Right.
No matter what you did for customer A, you do not have to do the same thing for customer B.
Right.
So, okay, you take the hit on the customer and you find out the cord was too short, or you find out that you weren't clear in your instructions, or you find out that when you went to the website, it was in 12-point type and people can't read 12-point type on their phones or tablets. Okay, change the type size. But you get that feedback from the customer, because then the customer starts to be more in line with, well, Josh wasn't such a bad guy. Feldman was not so unreasonable. I mean, it was like the pasta sauce. I could have probably squeezed another dime or 15 cents out of it, but I didn't have time. And I ran the math. And I tell everybody, do not try to second guess what your decision was. Live with it and move on. Now, I could tell you, the next time I got a railroad car filled with pasta sauce, I wouldn't sell it for $1.65. I would probably bounce it up another 10 cents or 20 cents, because 10 cents on 33,000 happens to be a lot of money.
Especially when adjusted for inflation.
That's right. Right.
Jeez. Yeah. Well, see, and that is so cool. And I hope people will look at that story, both of those stories, honestly, and think about how you're running your customer service. I mean, that's could you could almost limit how many people you have to have on customer service down to like 10% of the people, because it's like, we'll just ask them what they want and give it to them.
And give it to them.
The end.
And then every week you have a report that comes out that says you did what? Okay, let's not do that again. You know, because here's why. I mean, a perfect example is Costco. When Costco opened here in Chicago, they had a big sign that says, "We take back any product, no questions asked." And I said to the guy in the electronics department, "Do you realize that every time they change an operating system or change a tweak to a product, everybody's going to bring it back?" He goes, "Nope, people won't take advantage of us like that." Wrong, amundo. Every time that there was a new permutation, people would pack up their old one, bring it back, and say, "You said you'd take it back. Here it is. Now give me the new one." And they were doing the upgrades. Now Costco's has limited that on electronics. Okay, most people said, "Well, I got away with it before, but I'm not going to get away with it now." So you start to learn how to do those things in a little bit better fashion. A quick one. I was talking to a group of dentists, and the dentists were saying the biggest pushback was that we were charging $150 to fill a cavity, and people thought it was too expensive. I said, "That's because you priced it wrong." "No, that's what we have to get, blah, blah." And no, let me show you how to do it. Filling a cavity is $50. What? $50. I'll fill your cavity. Did you want that to hurt? Because the Novocaine is $75. By the way, did you want it to hurt when I gave you the shot? No. Well, that's another $50. Now nobody's crying about the filling. It's the pain. So back to my story. The more pain that you can remove, the more people will pay for it. Why do movie theaters not charge you where you sit, but live theater does? Are you saying the movie experience is different than live theater? No, there are seats in the theater that are perfect. Right vision, right sound, etc. Why don't you charge more for that? We never thought of it. Well, how about this? If people are objecting to the price, why don't you have a VIP package? It's $25 to sit in the best seat. And by the way, you can see as many movies as you want on that day. Josh, how many movies could you sit through in a single day?
That's a hard one. Depends on the day.
Okay. Could you
Two.
do
Let's say
two?
two.
Yeah. I mean, could you do five?
Oh, heck no.
No. Could you do four?
Probably not.
You push it to three if you really have a great cushion on your butt or whatever it is, right? So you say, okay, for $25, you can see all the movies you want. Everybody goes, woo, this is great. But nobody is going to do it. And yet they will have paid you 2.5 times what it costs you to see one.
Right.
So it's like, hey, 7-day free trial. Most people forget it. Do you know that AOL still has about 30 to 40% of their overall income? People that are still paying $9.95 for AOL service?
That is kind of sad.
I mean, you shake your head, you go, but it's free everywhere else. Well, it doesn't make it to the things I need to deal with to cancel it.
Right.
So they're making the money all the time. Yeah.
I can't tell you how many softwares we have that I probably don't use at all anymore. But if it's less than $100 a month, I'm not even going to think about changing it because it's not worth the time.
Well, it's a pain in the neck. They don't make it easy for you.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
Geez. Well, see, this has been very insightful. I did not think we were going to go to customer service route, but this has been a beautiful route. So I want to ask you this though, James, especially for a lot of our people who are stuck at the $1 million mark, because that is the most common mark to get stuck at. Every person I know I've ever talked to got stuck there for at least a year. And I, I've got my own assumptions about it, but why do you think they're getting stuck at a million, and how would you recommend they break that barrier?
Because they're spending too much time on customer acquisition and not enough time on customer retention.
Hmm.
You got a happy customer, they will do more business with you. So focus on the customers you have to build your business because they already like you. You don't have to spend the time and money convincing them. You just got to give them another product.
Right.
When Apple really was in their prime, they only had about 2 dozen products. Period. Now, Tim Cook comes in and he takes the Dell model and he's trying to, come up with all these other changes to it. But the average customer is happy with what they've got. Well, we also make it in green and red and yellow. Okay, I'll take those two. Yeah, okay.
Hmm.
The $1 million mark is easy to overcome with three things. Number one, whoever is talking to the customer, that's the center of gravity. And say to your customer a very simple question: what would you like to get from us that we're not providing? The customer will tell you. Why? Because the customer already likes you, already doing business with you. Why does the customer want to go elsewhere? Number two, what's the next add on? So you watch McDonald's. Would you like to supersize that? They are so ingrained when you go and you order an Egg McMuffin and a cup of coffee, she goes, would you like fries? Because she's been taught that's the next thing to ask, right? Why don't we do that when you're running your own company? What else can I do for you? Like I have a couple of companies that are integrated. I just had a guy place his second order with me. In the box that went out, I included some of my chocolate. I have a chocolate company. He probably doesn't know I have a chocolate company. But if he's placed his second order with me for the watch winder, I'll give him the chocolate and he goes, hey, where'd you get the chocolate? I go, from moi. Go to this site. And if you're happy with the winder, you're going to love the chocolate. So I always refer to sampling as ampling. Give an ample sample, not this little breadcrumb. If it's a piece of chocolate, give them a whole piece of chocolate or half a piece of chocolate. I've been to places that, they cut them up in pieces that are so small, they look like grains of sand and they, and they want you to make that decision. Well, people will just eat the samples. No, that's not true. People will try it, and then their risk of trying something gets reduced.
And that's really what it is at the end of the day. I mean, they're trying to, every decision we make is analyzing risk and moving forward. I mean, their
Right.
first level of risk is this going to be poison, right? Am I going to die eating the sample? But then once that's taken care of, they're going to be they're going to say that was delicious. I want more. So I love
Again,
that.
again, if you're happy with the product or service, then why do you want to go elsewhere?
Right. Wow. Geez. See, and I hope people will look at that. Just take a step back and look at your company. I know I've been doing that this entire time. I don't do this very often, so good work, James. You got me thinking.
So the thing with customer service is I've written 6 books on customer service. So the whole basis of customer service is called dating your customer. If you think about the first date, everything had to be perfect. By the third or the fifth date, you go, hey, babe, pick up the pizza in the movie. So you got to keep your retail or your service at the first date. And dating is dazzle them, anticipate their needs, treat them the way they want to be treated, be innovative in every solution, nurture the relationship, and that guarantees you continually have business. Dating your customer.
Yeah. Wow. Love that. Make sure you don't jump right to marriage, right?
Well, that's a different conversation altogether.
Dazzle them. Dazzle them.
Dazzle them, right.
I love that. Well, James, we have covered a lot of different topics. So I want to pause for a second and tell everybody he has a book that covers all of this and so much more. So could you give us, James, the link and access to be able to access the book? And then also you have a course that you're launching as well. Give us a little background on that.
So to get the book is JFA, James Feldman Associate, .tips, TIPS, / Amazon. The dating book is JFA.tips / dating, DATING, Amazon. Now you notice that I've shortened the URLs because I found a company that will not only do the shortening, but they let you brand it. So every tip that I give out starts off JFA.tips / Now I've cut down the learning and the writing part of it. You just need the front half.
So go put random words back there and see what tips he's got.
Yeah, exactly. Go right ahead. Or drop me a note and I'll send them to you.
I love that. Well, and everybody, make sure you go check those out. We will add those in the description as well as near the video. If you're watching this on video, it'll be somewhere around the video. But James, I want to ask you one final thing. So if you could give one final parting piece of guidance to a budding entrepreneur, what would that be?
Beware of distractions disguised as opportunities.
Can you elaborate just a little bit on that? Because I am genuinely curious about that.
We all get enamored with the bright, shiny objects instead of focusing on what our core competency is or the direction we want to go. So if you see something that you think is an opportunity, carefully look at it to see if it's really a distraction. If it's a distraction, walk away from it. The issue is we all think, well, if I pivot by adding this, well, but it's taken away resources, it's taken away time, it's taken away everything with it. If you go to my website or you drop me a book, I will give you 100 of these ahas. I call them Jim's ahas. And the ahas are really, really common sense. So, one of mine is never try to sell your big idea to small-minded people. Because a lot of entrepreneurs run it by somebody who's never run a business, never taken a risk. They poo-poo it, and you go, well, it must not be a good idea. Hello? Have you ever done it? No. Then why are you giving me advice?